The thread snapped with a sharp, satisfying sound as Lauren Cole finished the knot. She ran her gloved hand over the mare's flank, checking the suture line one last time. It was clean work, efficient and functional, exactly like everything else in her life. The horse, a skittish quarter horse named Duchess, let out a low huff of breath, the sedative finally wearing off enough for her to register the cold draft seeping through the barn's wooden slats. "Easy, girl," Lauren murmured, her voice steady. She didn't use the cooing, high-pitched tone most people used with animals. Animals respected calm, not performance. She stripped off her latex gloves, tossing them into the biohazard bin near the stall door, and picked up her heavy canvas coat from the hook. It was nearly 2 a.m. The isolation of the property, located miles outside the main grid of Chicago's suburbs, usually offered a heavy, comforting silence. Tonight, however, the atmosphere was different. The wind was howling against the corrugated metal roof of the barn, rattling the old beams. Lauren wasn't afraid of storms. She had weathered worse things than thunder and lightning in her 26 years. She was more concerned about the old oak tree near the driveway, and whether it would hold up against the gusts. She picked up her medical bag, a reinforced leather kit that contained everything from scalpels to heavy-duty sedatives, and stepped out into the deluge. The rain wasn't just falling, it was being driven sideways by a wind that felt personal. She lowered her head, shielding her eyes, and began the trek across the muddy yard toward the farmhouse. The house was an old Victorian structure she had bought cheap and fixed up herself, room by room. It stood alone in the dark, a single yellow light burning on the porch. Lauren was halfway to the porch steps when a sound tore through the rhythmic pounding of the wind. It wasn't thunder. It was the high-pitched, mechanical scream of rubber shredding against wet asphalt, followed immediately by the dry, popping cracks of gunfire. She froze, her hand gripping the handle of her medical bag tighter. The sounds were coming from the county road that bordered her property, a road that saw maybe 3 cars a day. The screeching grew louder, closer, accompanied by the metallic crunch of a vehicle losing control. Headlights swept across the wet grass, blindingly bright and erratic. Lauren didn't scream. She didn't have time. She threw herself to the side, landing hard in the mud just as a massive black shape plowed through her white picket fence. The vehicle didn't stop there. With a sickening, earth-shaking boom, the car flew across the yard and slammed directly into the side of her house. The impact was so violent the ground beneath her vibrated. Wood splintered, glass shattered, and the groan of compromising structural beams echoed into the night. Then, silence returned, heavy and ominous, broken only by the hissing of a radiator and the relentless rain. Lauren pushed herself up, mud slicking her jeans. Her first instinct was to check the barn, but the crash had happened at the house. The living room wall was gone. In its place sat the rear end of a black sedan, swallowed halfway by her home. She didn't run away. She ran toward it. "Hello?" she shouted, her voice whipped away by the wind. She scrambled up the porch steps, ignoring the debris littering the wood. The front door was jammed, the frame twisted by the impact. She didn't waste time trying to force it. She went through the hole the car had made. Inside, the air was thick with drywall dust, and the acrid, stinging scent of gasoline. That smell triggered a primal alarm in her brain. Fire. If that tank sparked, the whole house would go up. She climbed over a pile of bricks that used to be her fireplace. The car, a heavy armored model that looked like a tank disguised as a luxury sedan, was wedged tight. The driver's side door was pinned against a fallen beam. Lauren dropped her bag and scrambled onto the hood of the car, looking through the shattered windshield. The driver was slumped over the wheel. He was unmoving. "Can you hear me?" Lauren yelled, using the flashlight from her phone to sweep the interior. No response. She moved to the passenger side, yanking the door open. It gave way with a heavy metallic groan. The interior lights flickered on, illuminating the wreckage. The airbags had deployed but were starting to deflate, revealing the man inside. He was big. That was her first thought. Even slumped over, his shoulders were broad, filling the seat. He was wearing a black suit, the jacket torn at the shoulder, the white shirt beneath soaked in crimson. It wasn't just from the crash. She saw the hole in the upholstery of the seat, then the dark spreading stain on his abdomen. He had been shot. Lauren's mind shifted gears instantly. The veterinarian vanished. The emergency responder took over. Anatomy was anatomy, and bleeding was bleeding. She reached across the console, her fingers searching for a pulse at his neck. His skin was hot, damp with sweat, but the pulse was there. Thready. Fast. But there. "We need to get you out," she muttered to herself. The smell of gasoline was getting stronger. A hiss from the engine block warned her that time was running out. She unbuckled his seatbelt. He slumped further, a dead weight. Lauren gritted her teeth. She braced her legs against the doorframe, grabbed him by the lapels of his jacket, and pulled. He didn't budge. He was solid muscle and dead weight. "Come on," she hissed, adrenaline flooding her system. She adjusted her grip, wrapping her arms under his armpits. "Work with me." With a heave that strained every muscle in her back, she managed to drag him across the center console. His head lolled back, revealing a sharp jawline and blood trickling from a cut on his temple. She didn't stop to admire his bone structure. She pulled him out of the passenger door, his legs dragging over the gear shift, and let him drop onto the floor of her ruined living room. It wasn't far enough. The fumes were dizzying. She grabbed his ankles this time, dragging him across the hardwood floor, over the debris, toward the kitchen which was structurally intact. It was grueling work. Her boots slipped on the dust-covered floor, but she didn't stop until they were past the threshold of the kitchen. Just as she dropped his legs, a loud whoosh sounded behind them. She looked back to see flames licking up the side of the car, catching on the curtains she had sewn herself. The fire was small for now, but it would grow. She turned her attention back to the man. He was lying on his back, breathing in shallow, ragged gasps. Lauren knelt beside him, ripping her own coat off to clear her arms. She grabbed her medical bag, which she had instinctively dragged along with her, and snapped it open. She needed to assess the damage. She pulled a pair of trauma shears from the kit and cut through his expensive shirt, ripping the fabric open from the navel up to the sternum. The wound was ugly, a bullet entry wound on the lower left abdomen. No exit wound that she could see without rolling him over, which meant the bullet was still inside, likely nicking something vital. The blood was dark and flowing steadily, pooling on her clean kitchen tiles. "Okay," she breathed, her hands moving with practiced speed. "Pressure first." She grabbed a thick pad of sterile gauze from her bag and pressed it directly into the wound. The man groaned, a low guttural sound of pain, but his eyes remained closed. Lauren put her entire body weight behind the pressure, leaning over him, her hair falling out of its messy bun to curtain her face. "Stay with me," she ordered, though she knew he couldn't hear her. She reached for a hemostat with her free hand, preparing to clamp any visible bleeders if she had to. This wasn't a sterile operating room, and he wasn't a horse, but the principles of stopping a leak were universal. She checked his face again. He was pale, the kind of gray-white that signaled shock. His features were striking, even in this state. Sharp nose, high cheekbones, dark eyebrows drawn together in unconscious pain. He didn't look like the farmers or local mechanics she dealt with. He looked like the kind of trouble that came with a warning label. Thunder cracked directly overhead, shaking the house again. Or maybe it was the car settling into the foundation. The lights in the kitchen flickered and died, plunging them into semi-darkness, illuminated only by the fire starting to grow in the living room and the flashlight beam from her phone on the counter. Lauren didn't flinch. She kept her hands buried in the wound, feeling the warmth of his blood seeping through the gauze, coating her fingers. She checked her watch. Minutes matter, if the ambulance didn't come soon, but she hadn't called an ambulance. She realized with a jolt that in the chaos, she hadn't touched her phone except to use the light. She shifted her weight, reaching for the phone with one bloody hand while keeping pressure with the other. Suddenly, a hand clamped around her wrist. The grip was iron-hard, shocking in its intensity. Lauren gasped, dropping the phone. It clattered to the tile, the light spinning wildly before settling on the man's face. His eyes were open. They were dark, almost black in the shadows, burning with a terrifying lucidity. There was no confusion in them, no haze of concussion. He looked at her with the focus of a predator that had just woken up in a trap. Lauren froze. She was used to animals waking up from sedation. They were often confused, scared, thrashing. This man wasn't thrashing. He was completely still, except for the crushing grip on her wrist. "You're hurt," she said, her voice shaking slightly for the first time. "I'm a doctor. Sort of. I'm trying to stop the bleeding." He didn't let go. His gaze traveled from her face, down to her bloody hands pressing into his stomach, and then to the burning wreck in the other room. He assessed the situation in a heartbeat. He tried to sit up, but the pain slammed him back down. A hiss of breath escaped his teeth. His hand tightened on her wrist to the point of pain, anchoring him to consciousness. "Don't," she commanded, reverting to her professional tone. "You have a bullet in your gut. If you move, you'll tear the clot I'm trying to form." He looked back at her. His eyes locked onto hers, analyzing, calculating. He saw the blood on her clothes, the determination in her jaw, the blue of her eyes wide with shock but void of panic. "Phone," he rasped. His voice was like gravel, deep and ruined. "I was just about to call 911, Lauren said, trying to pull her wrist free to reach the device. "No," he growled. The word was a command, not a request. He pulled her down closer to him, ignoring the fresh wave of blood that seeped from his wound at the exertion. His face was inches from hers now. She could smell the metallic tang of blood, the smoke, and beneath it all, an expensive, woodsy cologne. "You can't call them," he whispered, his breath hitting her cheek. "You're dying," she argued, trying to keep the pressure on his wound despite his interference. "You need a hospital, no police," he said, his eyes narrowing. "It wasn't an accident." Lauren paused. The gunshots, the way he was dressed, the armor on the car. The pieces clicked into place rapidly, forming a picture she didn't want to see. "Who are you?" she whispered. He didn't answer the question. Instead, he looked past her, toward the shattered wall where the wind and rain were blowing in, feeding the fire. He seemed to be listening for something over the storm. "They're coming," he said, his voice straining. "To finish it." Lauren's heart hammered against her ribs. "Who?" He looked back at her, and the intensity of his gaze pinned her to the spot. "The men who did this." He coughed, a wet, hacking sound that brought a fleck of blood to his lips. His grip on her wrist didn't loosen. If anything, it got tighter, possessive and desperate. "Listen to me," he said, forcing the words out through the pain. "You dragged me out. You touched me. I saved your life," she snapped, fear making her defensive. "You involved yourself," he corrected darkly. His thumb pressed into the pulse point of her wrist, feeling the rapid beat of her heart. "Use your head. If they find me here, if they find you here." He trailed off as the sound of another engine cut through the storm outside. It was distant, but getting closer. A heavy engine, moving slow, searching. The man's eyes widened slightly. He knew that sound. "Is there a back way?" he demanded. "What? Is there a back way?" He enunciated every word, fighting the darkness encroaching on his vision. "The kitchen door leads to the porch," Lauren stammered. "But my truck is—" "Get me up," he ordered. "You can't walk," she refused. "You've lost too much blood. If I stay here, I'm dead," he said. "And if you're standing here when they walk through that door, you're dead too." The bluntness of the statement hit her harder than the wind outside. She looked at the door, then back at him. He wasn't lying. She could see it in the grim set of his jaw. This wasn't a drama. This was an execution in progress, and she had just stepped onto the scaffold. She started. Panic finally beginning to claw at her throat. He saw the hesitation. He knew he was about to pass out. The edges of his vision were already black. He needed to make sure she understood the stakes before he went under. He needed to make sure she didn't run to the police, because the police were likely on the payroll of the men hunting him. He pulled her down until their foreheads almost touched. The intimacy was terrifying, forced by blood and circumstance. "Look at me," he commanded. She looked. She couldn't look away. "Now you can't leave," he whispered, the words sounding like a sentence. "They saw your face." Lauren stared at him, the air leaving her lungs. "What?" "They saw you," he lied. Or maybe he believed it. Or maybe he just needed to terrify her enough to keep her close. "You're in this now." His hand finally lost its strength. It slid from her wrist, leaving a smear of blood on her skin like a brand. His eyes rolled back, the lids fluttering shut as his body gave up the fight against the trauma. "Wait!" Lauren cried, tapping his cheek. "Don't pass out. Wake up." Silvio Ricchetti didn't answer. He lay motionless on her kitchen floor, the blood continuing to seep around her fingers. Lauren sat back on her heels, trembling. The fire in the living room crackled louder, consuming the sofa. Outside, the sound of the approaching engine grew distinct. A heavy vehicle, crunching over the gravel of her driveway, slowing down as it spotted the wreckage. She was alone. Her house was burning. A dying man was on her floor, and killers were in her driveway. "They saw your face." The words echoed in her mind. She looked down at the man. He was her only link to understanding what was happening. And he was unconscious. She looked at the back door. She could run. She could run into the cornfields and hide. But if she ran, he would die. And if they really had seen her, they would hunt her down eventually. Lauren Cole swallowed the scream building in her throat. She looked at her medical bag, then at the man's prone form. She grabbed the handle of the bag. "Damn it," she whispered. She grabbed his ankles again. She didn't check the driveway. She didn't check the fire. She just pulled. She pulled him deeper into the house, toward the pantry, toward the shadows, as the headlights of the second car swept across the kitchen window, illuminating the blood she had left behind. She wasn't a veterinarian anymore. She was an accomplice, and the night had only just begun. The pantry was a claustrophobic box of shadows, smelling of dried herbs, flour, and the overwhelming metallic stench of fresh blood. Lauren had managed to drag the heavy man behind a stack of shelving units, just seconds before the headlights of the second vehicle swept across the kitchen windows, painting the walls in brief, blinding strokes of white light. The heavy rumble of the engine outside idled, a mechanical growl that vibrated through the floorboards, distinct from the crackling fire consuming the living room. Lauren was crouched on the linoleum, her hands slick with red. Her heart was beating a frantic rhythm against her ribs, a sensation she usually associated with trapped animals, not herself. Beside her, Silvio Ricchetti shifted. The movement was small, a mere tensing of muscle, but in the tight space it felt seismic. He was awake again. The momentary lapse in consciousness had passed, replaced by a cold, terrifying lucidity that cut through his pain like a scalpel. He didn't groan. He didn't ask where he was. His dark brown eyes, now adjusted to the gloom, locked onto her face with an intensity that made the air feel thin. "How many?" he rasped. The sound was wet, broken, but the authority in it was intact. Lauren swallowed, her throat dry. "One car. Maybe a truck. I saw the lights." "They'll circle first," Silvio said. He tried to adjust his position, pressing a hand against the makeshift packing Lauren had shoved into his abdominal wound. His knuckles turned white. "They check the perimeter. Then they breach. We have 3 minutes, maybe 4. We need to stay quiet," Lauren whispered, her instinct to hide overriding everything else. If we stay here, we burn." Silvio cut her off. He reached out, his grip finding her forearm again. It wasn't a romantic gesture. It was an anchor. "Look at the smoke, Dottoressa. They aren't coming in to check pulses. They're coming to scrub the site." Lauren looked toward the kitchen doorway. The orange glow from the living room was brighter now, the crackling sound louder. Smoke was beginning to curl along the ceiling, a gray snake seeking an exit. He was right. The crash hadn't just damaged the house. It had started a bonfire, and the men outside would likely help it along to destroy the evidence. "My truck is out back," Lauren said, her mind finally engaging with the tactical reality. "It's old, but it runs. If we can get to the service road behind the barn—" "Go," Silvio commanded. He tried to push himself up, using the shelves for leverage. His face went ashen, sweat beading on his forehead, but he forced his body to obey. "Get the truck. Bring it to the back door." Lauren nodded, preparing to move. But then she froze. The realization hit her with the force of a physical blow. "The barn," she breathed. Silvio looked at her, his eyes narrowing. "What?" "The barn is right next to the house," Lauren said, her voice rising in panic. "If the house goes up, the wind will carry the sparks. The roof is old wood. It'll catch in minutes." "So let it catch," Silvio snapped, his patience fraying under the agony of his wound. "We are leaving. My patients are in there," Lauren hissed, turning back to him, her fear momentarily replaced by a fierce, professional protectiveness. "I have 3 horses in the stalls. One is sedated. Duchess can't walk out on her own if the smoke gets thick. I have to open the gates." Silvio stared at her as if she were speaking a dead language. He was a man who traded in lives like currency, who understood sacrifice as a necessary component of business. "You want to go out there, in the open, with killers in the driveway, to save livestock?" "They aren't livestock to me," she said, her voice hard. "They're my responsibility. I won't leave them to burn alive. You die, they die anyway," he countered, his voice a low growl. "You step out that door, you're a target. Then I'll be quick." Lauren didn't wait for his permission. She wasn't one of his soldiers. She scrambled up, keeping low, and moved toward the back door of the kitchen. "Wait!" Silvio's voice was a strained bark, but she was already moving. She slipped out into the storm. The cold rain was a shock to her system, washing away the warmth of the house instantly. The wind was ferocious, whipping her hair across her face, blinding her. She stayed close to the siding of the house, moving in the shadows, her eyes darting toward the front of the property. She could see the silhouette of the second vehicle, a large SUV, idling near the wreckage of Silvio's car. 2 men were out, flashlights cutting through the rain, examining the crushed sedan. They were distracted, shouting to each other over the wind. Lauren sprinted. She crossed the muddy gap between the house and the barn, her boots slipping on the wet earth. She reached the heavy sliding door of the barn and heaved it open just enough to squeeze through. Inside, the smell of hay and warm animal bodies was a stark contrast to the chaos outside. The horses were already panicking. They could smell the smoke. Hooves kicked against wooden stalls, a rhythmic, terrified drumming. I know," Lauren whispered, rushing to the first stall. She didn't waste time with halters. She threw the bolt and swung the door wide. "Go, get out." She slapped the flank of the gelding, a big roan, and he bolted into the center aisle. She moved to the next. Duchess, the mare she had stitched up earlier. She was groggy, stumbling as the noise frightened her. Lauren grabbed her mane, pulling her forward, guiding her out of the stall. "Come on, Mama," she urged. "Move." She got Duchess into the aisle and ran to the back of the barn, throwing open the large rear doors that led to the open pasture. The wind howled in, but it was the path to safety. She shooed the horses out, watching them gallop into the darkness, away from the fire, away from the men. Safe. She turned to leave, but a beam of light cut through the cracks in the barn wall. The men were moving. They were coming toward the house. Lauren dropped to a crouch. She had to get back to Silvio. She had to get the truck. But the path back to the house was now exposed. Back in the kitchen, Silvio Ricchetti had managed to drag himself into a sitting position against the cabinets. The pain was a living thing, tearing at his side with every breath, but he pushed it down into a dark corner of his mind. He checked his jacket. His primary weapon was gone, lost in the crash. He reached down to his ankle holster. Empty. He cursed silently in Italian. The impact must have torn it loose. He looked around the kitchen. Knives. He could use a knife. It was sloppy, close-range work, and in his condition, he'd lose a wrestling match, but he could maybe take one with him. Then he saw it. Under the debris of the table, half hidden by a fallen chair, was the glint of black metal, his spare piece. A compact 9mm he kept in the glove box. It must have been thrown clear when the dashboard shattered. He crawled toward it. The movement cost him dearly. Black spots danced in his vision, and he felt the warm gush of fresh blood soaking the bandage Lauren had applied. He gritted his teeth, sweat stinging his eyes, and reached out. His fingers closed around the cold, textured grip of the gun. It felt like shaking hands with an old friend. He checked the magazine. Full. Chambered. He heard the back door open. He raised the weapon instantly, leveling it at the shadow entering the room. "It's me," Lauren gasped, throwing her hands up as she slid inside, dripping wet and shivering. Silvio didn't lower the gun immediately. He tracked her movement, ensuring no one was behind her. When the door clicked shut, he let the barrel drop. "The horses?" he asked. There was no mockery in his voice now. He had watched her run through the rain from the window. He had seen the risk she took. It was stupid, reckless, and undeniably brave. It told him everything he needed to know about her. She didn't panic, she acted. And she protected what was hers. "Out," she panted, wiping rain from her eyes. "They're safe." "Good," he said, "because we're out of time." A heavy thud echoed from the front of the house, the sound of a boot kicking in the front door. "Check the rooms," a deep voice shouted from the living room. "If he's not in the car, he crawled somewhere to die." Lauren's eyes went wide. She looked at Silvio. He beckoned her closer. "Come here." She moved to him, crouching beside him. The fire in the living room was roaring now, the heat seeping into the kitchen. The smoke was getting thicker, creating a haze that stung the lungs. Silvio took her hand, the one that wasn't holding the gun, and pressed something cold and heavy into it. "I need you to listen to me very carefully," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the fire and the storm. "I can't walk to the truck. Not fast enough." "I'll help you," she said. "No," he said. "You're going to have to cover me." He pressed the gun into her palm. Lauren stared at it. It was heavy, terrifyingly real. She had treated gunshot wounds. She had dug bullets out of hunting dogs, but she had never held a weapon designed to kill people. I can't," she stammered. "I don't know how." "It's a machine," Silvio said, his eyes locking onto hers, forcing her to focus. "Just like your tools. Point, squeeze. It's not magic. I can't kill anyone," she whispered. "You might not have a choice," he said grimly. "If they come through that door, they will put a bullet in your head, and then they will burn this house down with your body inside. That is the reality. Do you understand?" Lauren looked at the gun, then at the door leading to the hallway. She could hear heavy footsteps crunching on the broken glass. They were getting closer. "Show me," she said. Her voice trembled, but she tightened her grip on the handle. Silvio guided her hands. He ignored the pain in his gut, focusing entirely on her. His large, rough hands covered hers, adjusting her grip. "Thumbs forward," he instructed, his voice low and steady in her ear. "Don't cross them behind the slide or it'll take your skin off. Finger off the trigger until you are ready to destroy what is in front of you." He moved her finger to the frame of the gun. "There is no safety on this model," he said. "The safety is your brain. Do not point it at anything you want to keep breathing." The footsteps stopped just outside the kitchen. A shadow fell across the slice of light on the floor. "Marco?" a voice called out. "Kitchen is clear? Checking it now." Another voice replied. Closer. Silvio looked at Lauren. He saw the terror in her blue eyes, but he also saw the steel spine that had made her run into a storm to save a horse. "We go out the back," he whispered. "I'll take the lead. If I fall, you don't stop. You get to the truck, you drive, and you don't look back." "I'm not leaving you," she said. It wasn't a romantic declaration. It was a statement of fact. She hadn't saved him from the crash just to let him die on her kitchen floor. Silvio felt a strange sensation in his chest that had nothing to do with the bullet wound. He nodded once. "Help me up." Lauren hooked her arm under his uninjured side. She gritted her teeth and heaved. Silvio groaned, a sound torn from the depths of his agony, as he forced his legs to take his weight. He leaned heavily on her, his breathing jagged. They stood there for a second, swaying in the smoky darkness. A man and a woman, covered in blood and rain, holding on to each other because there was nothing else left. "Ready?" he asked. Lauren gripped the gun in her right hand, her left arm supporting the weight of a Mafia don. She looked at the back door. "Ready," she lied. Silvio kicked the back door open. The wind grabbed it, slamming it against the siding. The noise alerted the men inside. "Kitchen! They're in the kitchen! Go!" Silvio roared, pushing himself off her to stumble into the rain. Lauren followed, turning back for just a split second. She saw a figure burst through the smoke into the kitchen. a silhouette raising a rifle. She didn't think. She didn't weigh the moral implications. She raised the gun the way Silvio had shown her, both hands shaking, and pulled the trigger. The recoil shocked her, traveling up her arms like an electric jolt. The gun barked, a flash of fire in the dark. The shot went wide, shattering a cabinet, but it forced the gunman to duck for cover. "Don't stop!" Silvio yelled from the yard. Lauren turned and ran. She caught up to him near the edge of the driveway where her old rusted pickup truck was parked. Silvio was leaning against the passenger door, his face white as a sheet, clutching his side where fresh blood was soaking through his suit. "Keys," he demanded. She fumbled in her pocket, pulling out the ring. She unlocked the door, shoving him inside. He fell into the seat more than he sat. Lauren ran to the driver's side. She jumped in, jamming the key into the ignition. The engine turned over with a reluctant whine, sputtering before roaring to life. A bullet shattered the rear window, spraying them with safety glass. Lauren screamed, ducking her head. "Drive!" Silvio shouted, slumping low in the seat. She slammed her foot on the gas. The truck spun its tires in the mud, fishtailing wildly before finding traction. They shot forward, not toward the road where the enemy SUV was blocking the exit, but toward the fields. She smashed through the wooden fence she had built herself last summer. The truck bounced violently over the uneven ground of the pasture. Lauren fought the steering wheel, her knuckles white. Behind them, the house was fully engulfed now. Flames licked up the sides of the second story, turning her home into a pyre against the black sky. She saw the headlights of the SUV turning, trying to follow. But the heavy armored vehicle bogged down in the deep mud of the yard. They kept driving. Through the tall grass, through the storm, into the dark embrace of the woods that bordered her land. Lauren didn't look at Silvio. She kept her eyes on the tree line, tears finally mixing with the rain on her face. She drove until the glow of the fire was just a faint orange smudge in the rearview mirror. Only then did she glance at the passenger seat. Silvio was watching her. He was barely conscious, his head resting against the cool glass of the window, the gun resting loosely in his lap. He looked at her profile. The sharp nose, the determined jaw, the blood spattered on her cheek. "You missed," he murmured, his voice faint. "I hit the cabinet," she said, her voice shaking. "You didn't freeze," he said. It sounded like a benediction. He closed his eyes, his breathing shallow. Lauren reached over, her hand trembling, and rested it on his neck. His pulse was there. Fast, weak, but there. "Where are we going?" she asked, the reality of her situation finally crashing down on her. She was homeless. She was hunted. She had just shot at a man. Silvio opened his eyes one last time, fighting the darkness. "Chicago," he whispered. "We go to the city, we disappear." Lauren looked ahead at the dark, winding trail that led away from everything she had ever known. She tightened her grip on the wheel. "Okay," she said softly. "Chicago." She drove on into the night, the storm swallowing them whole, leaving nothing behind but footprints in the mud and a burning house to mark where Lauren Cole's life had ended, and where something else entirely had begun. The old suspension of the rusted pickup truck groaned in protest as Lauren Cole slammed it over a submerged root, the vehicle shuddering violently before finding traction in the deep, churning mud. The headlights cut frantic, bouncing arcs through the deluge, illuminating a world that had narrowed down to wet tree trunks and the sleek black ribbon of a flooding dirt path. Inside the cab, the air was a suffocating mix of stale tobacco smoke from years past, wet dog, and the sharp copper tang of fresh blood that seemed to coat the back of Lauren's throat. She didn't look in the rearview mirror. She couldn't. If she looked, she knew she would see the orange glow that had already stained the low-hanging clouds behind them. She would see the pyre of everything she had built, the Victorian farmhouse she had sanded by hand, the clinic where she had saved countless animals, the photos of her parents on the mantel. It was all being consumed, fed by the gasoline of a hit squad and the uncaring fury of the storm. "Keep your eyes forward." Silvio Ricchetti's voice was a rough scrape against the silence, barely audible over the roaring engine and the rain hammering the metal roof. "I know where I'm going," Lauren snapped, her voice tight and trembling with a rage she hadn't known she possessed. She wrestled the steering wheel as the truck hydroplaned slightly on a patch of slick clay. She corrected the skid with a muscle memory born of a lifetime on these back roads. This trail cuts through the state forest. It dumps out onto the old highway near the quarry. They won't follow us here. Their heavy SUVs will bottom out within a mile. Silvio didn't answer immediately. He was slumped against the passenger door, his left hand pressing a wad of napkins. Grabbed from the glove box in a moment of desperation. Against his side. The blood was soaking through them, dark and heavy. His face was a mask of concentration, his jaw clenched so hard a muscle feathered beneath his ear. He wasn't looking at the road. He was looking at her. He watched the way her hands, white-knuckled and stained with his blood, gripped the wheel. He saw the tears she refused to shed, tracking through the soot on her cheek. Most civilians would be screaming by now. They would be hysterical, freezing up, or begging for an explanation. Lauren Cole was doing none of those things. She was driving like a getaway pilot, calculating angles and traction, her mind evidently compartmentalizing the trauma in real time. "You're bleeding through," she said, glancing at him for a fraction of a second before returning her gaze to the treacherous path. "We need to stop and repack that wound." "No stopping," Silvio gritted out, closing his eyes as the truck hit another pothole that sent a jolt of agony up his spine. "Distance is the only medicine right now." "How far to the highway?" 10 miles of this, then pavement," she replied. "But we can't just drive this truck into the city. It's registered to me. If they know who I am..." "They know," Silvio confirmed, the coldness of his tone chilling her more than the draft coming through the window seals. "They ran the plates on your car before they even breached the house. They know your name, your social security number, where you went to veterinary school. By morning, your bank accounts will be flagged." Lauren felt a hollow pit open in her stomach. "So I'm just... gone? Erased? You're alive," Silvio said. "That's the only metric that matters tonight." He shifted, reaching into the inside pocket of his ruined suit jacket. His movements were slow, labored, like moving through water. He produced a small, nondescript black phone. It wasn't the smartphone she had seen him smash earlier. This was a burner, old school, plastic, and cheap. He flipped it open, the small blue screen illuminating his harsh features. He dialed a number from memory, his thumb leaving a bloody print on the keypad. He held it to his ear, waiting. Lauren slowed the truck slightly as they approached a sharp bend where the creek had overflowed. She navigated the water carefully, the engine whining as the exhaust pipe dipped perilously close to the surface. "It's me," Silvio said into the phone. He spoke English, but the cadence was clipped, coded. The shipment was compromised. Total loss. A pause. Lauren strained to hear the voice on the other end, but it was just a tinny murmur. "No," Silvio continued, his eyes opening to stare at the rain-streaked windshield. "I'm initiating the ghost protocol. Do not send a retrieval team to the primary site. It's burned. The asset is compromised." He looked at Lauren when he said asset. She tightened her grip on the wheel. "I need a clean extraction," he said. "Drop Point Bravo. The old motel off Route 41. Leave the keys in the exhaust pipe of the gray sedan. Make sure it's the sedan, Enzo. Nothing flashy." Another pause. Silvio listened, his expression darkening. "I don't care who is asking," he growled, a flash of the dangerous power returning to his voice despite his injury. "As far as the family is concerned, I died in that crash. Let Marco think he won. Let him get comfortable in my chair. I want total radio silence until I'm inside the city." He snapped the phone shut and dropped it into the cup holder. The silence that filled the cab afterwards was heavy with unspoken implications. "Ghost protocol?" Lauren asked, her voice flat. "If they think I'm dead, they stop hunting," Silvio explained, shifting his weight to alleviate the pressure on his abdomen. "They relax. They make mistakes. It buys us time." "Us," Lauren repeated. "You mean it buys you time? I'm just the collateral damage." Silvio turned his head, looking at her fully. The dashboard lights cast deep shadows across his face, emphasizing the sharp angles of his cheekbones and the intensity of his dark brown eyes. "You aren't collateral anymore, Dottoressa. You saved my life twice in 1 hour. That makes you an investment." "I'm a veterinarian," she corrected, swerving to avoid a fallen branch. "And I just lost everything because you couldn't keep your car on the road. I didn't crash because of bad driving," he murmured, his voice growing weaker as the adrenaline began to ebb, leaving only the shock. Brake lines were cut, bullet to the rear tire. It was precise. Lauren didn't respond. She was thinking about the horses. They were out in the pasture, scared and wet, but alive. Duchess would find the neighbor's barn. She was smart. The fire department would come eventually, but there would be nothing left to save of the house. She thought about her grandmother's quilt on the bed upstairs. Gone. Her diploma on the wall. Gone. She forced the thoughts away. Panic was a luxury she couldn't afford. She had a dying man in her passenger seat and a target on her back. "We're coming up on the highway," she announced. The trees were thinning out, replaced by the jagged silhouette of the old quarry fencing. "The motel is about 5 miles south." "Good," Silvio breathed. He was paler now, his skin taking on a waxy sheen. "Park around the back. Avoid the cameras in the lobby." "You need a hospital," Lauren said again, frustration bubbling up. "I can't stitch a gut wound with a first aid kit and a bottle of vodka." "You'll have better than that," Silvio muttered, his eyes fluttering shut. "Just get us to the car." The transition from the dirt path to the asphalt of the highway felt jarringly smooth. Lauren accelerated, the truck's engine roaring as she pushed it to its limit. The road was empty, a desolate stretch of wet blacktop under the storm. 10 minutes later, she spotted the flickering neon sign of the motel. It was a run-down place, the kind where people went when they didn't want to be found. "Vacancy," buzzed in a dying red light. Lauren killed the headlights before turning into the lot, coasting around the side of the building to the darker, unlit area near the dumpsters. She spotted it immediately. A nondescript gray sedan parked in the shadows, unassuming and common. She put the truck in park and killed the engine. The sudden silence was deafening, broken only by the rain drumming on the roof. "We're here," she said, turning to Silvio. He didn't move. "Silvio," she said, shaking his shoulder gently. He groaned, his eyes cracking open. He was fading fast. The blood loss was catching up to him. "Key," he mumbled. Exhaust. Lauren jumped out of the truck. The rain soaked her instantly, cold and biting. She ran to the sedan, crouching down behind it. Her fingers fumbled inside the cold metal of the tailpipe until she felt the hard edge of a key fob. She pulled it out, pressed the unlock button, and the lights of the sedan flashed once. She opened the rear door of the sedan first. On the seat, there was a duffel bag. She unzipped it quickly. Inside, she saw stacks of cash, passports, and a high-end medical trauma kit. He had prepared for this. She ran back to the truck and yanked the passenger door open. Silvio all but fell into her arms. He was heavy, dead weight against her, smelling of copper and expensive cologne and rain. "Come on," she grunted, wrapping her arm around his waist and hoisting him up. "Help me." He stumbled, his legs not working right, but he forced them to move. They shuffled across the wet pavement like participants in a grotesque three-legged race. Lauren bore the brunt of his weight, her boots slipping on the oil-slicked asphalt. She could feel the heat radiating off him, the fever of trauma setting in. "Almost there," she whispered, more to herself than him. They reached the sedan. She opened the passenger door and helped him lower himself into the seat. He let out a sharp hiss of breath as he settled, his hand immediately going back to the wound. "Medical bag," he gasped, pointing to the back seat. "I saw it," Lauren said. She slammed his door and ran around to the driver's side. The interior of the sedan smelled of nothing. It was sterile, new leather, and that generic new car scent. It felt alien compared to the earthy, lived-in smell of her truck. She started the car. The engine purred to life, silent and powerful. "My truck," Lauren said, looking at her faithful old vehicle abandoned next to a dumpster. "It's going to lead them right here." "Enzo will take care of it," Silvio murmured, his head leaning back against the headrest. He was fighting to stay awake, fighting to maintain command. "He's watching. He'll torch it and move it before the sun comes up." Lauren looked at the dark windows of the motel, wondering where this Enzo was watching from. The paranoia that Silvio lived with was contagious. She felt exposed, naked. "Drive," Silvio ordered, his voice barely a whisper. "Chicago. The secure garage on Wacker." "Do you know it?" "I know it," Lauren said. She put the car in gear. As they pulled out of the lot, leaving her truck and her past behind in the rain, Lauren looked at Silvio. He was watching her again. That intense predator's gaze dimmed by pain, but not extinguished. "You're doing well," he said softly. "I'm terrified," she admitted, her hands gripping the leather steering wheel. "Good," Silvio replied. "Fear keeps you sharp. Comfort gets you killed." He reached into the duffel bag she had tossed onto the center console and pulled out a fresh compression bandage. With shaking hands, he tried to open the packaging. "Let me," Lauren said, reaching over without taking her eyes off the road completely. She ripped the package open with one hand and handed it to him. "You have good hands," he noted, pressing the pad to his side. "Steady. I'm used to patients who try to kick me," she said dryly. A ghost of a smile touched Silvio's lips. Not a nice smile, but a grim acknowledgement of her grit. "I'll try not to kick." "You wouldn't have the energy," she retorted. The banter was a shield, a way to keep the reality at bay. The reality that she was driving a mafia boss into the heart of a city he claimed to rule, while her life burned to ash in the rearview mirror. "Why me?" she asked, the question slipping out before she could stop it. "Why did you crash at my house? Of all the miles of road. Fate," Silvio muttered, his eyes closing again. "Or bad luck, depending on how this ends. It ends with you paying me back for my house," Lauren said firmly. "If I live," Silvio whispered, his voice fading into the hum of the engine. "I'll give you the world, Lauren Cole. But first, you have to get me through the night." Lauren looked at him. He was out again. Unconscious or just conserving energy, she couldn't tell. She looked at the road ahead, the rain clearing slightly as they approached the highway lights. The city was aglow on the horizon, a sprawling beast of concrete and light. She was alone with him. There were no police coming, no fire trucks, no cavalry, just her, a stolen life, and the most dangerous man in Illinois bleeding out on her leather seats. Lauren Cole squared her shoulders. She drove. The veterinarian was gone. The survivor was behind the wheel. And she wasn't going to let him die. Not tonight. 3 weeks had passed since the night the sky had opened up and swallowed Lauren Cole's life whole. 3 weeks of silence. 3 weeks of existing in a vacuum where time was measured not by the sun or the needs of her animals, but by the healing rate of a bullet wound and the encrypted hum of server fans. The safe house was a fortress of glass and steel, perched atop one of Chicago's nondescript residential towers on Wacker Drive. It was nothing like the farmhouse. There was no smell of damp earth, no creaking wood, no comforting warmth of a living thing breathing in the next room. This place smelled of ozone, filtered air, and the harsh antiseptic cleanser Lauren used to scrub the granite countertops. It was luxurious, certainly. The furniture was Italian leather. The appliances were top-of-the-line German engineering, and the view of the river was worth millions, but it felt less like a home and more like a high-end cage. Lauren stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, looking down at the city lights blurring through the evening fog. She held a mug of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. She wasn't drinking it. She was just holding it for the warmth against her palms. Her reflection in the glass looked different than the woman who had run out into a storm to save a horse. That woman had been frantic, reactive. This woman was still, watchful, wearing gray cashmere lounge pants and a fitted black tank top that Silvio had ordered for her, along with a wardrobe of essentials. She looked like a ghost haunting a skyscraper. "You're pacing again, even when you're standing still," a voice rumbled from the kitchen island behind her. Lauren turned slowly. Silvio Ricchetti was sitting on a bar stool, the glow of 3 different laptops illuminating his face in harsh blue light. He looked better. The waxen, deathly pallor of that first night was gone, replaced by a tired but healthy olive tone. He was shirtless, a testament to the heat he claimed the central air couldn't regulate, though Lauren suspected it was just easier to change his bandages without fabric in the way. The dressing on his left side was clean, a stark white square against his tan skin. The bruising that had covered his ribs like a map of violence had faded to a sickly yellow-green, almost gone. He was healing with a terrifying speed, his body knitting itself back together through sheer force of will. "I'm not pacing," Lauren said, walking over to the sink to dump her cold coffee. "I'm thinking." "Dangerous habit," Silvio murmured, his eyes not leaving the center screen where lines of code and bank transfers scrolled continuously. "Thinking leads to worrying. Worrying changes nothing." "Easy for you to say," Lauren countered, leaning her hip against the counter. "You have an empire to rebuild from the grave. I just have a burnt foundation and a fake name." Silvio stopped typing. His hands, large and scarred, hovered over the keyboard. He looked up at her, and the intensity in those dark brown eyes hadn't diminished in 3 weeks. If anything, it had distilled into something sharper. Living in close quarters with him was like living with a tiger that was temporarily confined to a small room. He was calm, but the potential for violence was always humming beneath the surface. "You have safety," he said, his voice low, "and you have me." "I have you," Lauren repeated, a dry laugh escaping her throat. "And you have a ghost network. We're a regular pair of phantoms." She walked around the island, her veterinarian instincts taking over as she approached him. "It's time to check the incision. Rotate." Silvio didn't argue. In the beginning, he had fought her on every medical intervention, hating the weakness, hating the dependency. Now, it was part of their routine. He swiveled the chair, lifting his left arm so she could access his side. Lauren peeled back the medical tape with practiced gentleness. The wound was closing beautifully. The angry red edges had settled into a pink scar line, jagged but sealed. There was no sign of infection. She pressed her fingers lightly around the area, checking for heat or swelling. "Pain?" she asked. "Manageable." He grunted. "Scale of 1 to 10, Silvio. Don't give me the tough guy act. I've treated stallions less stubborn than you." He smirked, a rare expression that softened the harsh planes of his face. 3, only when I twist. It's healing well," she pronounced, applying a fresh layer of antibiotic ointment before securing a lighter dressing. "Another week and we can take the stitches out. You'll have a scar, but you kept the kidney." "I have 2, he said dismissively. "I can spare one." Lauren finished the dressing and washed her hands. She dried them on a towel, watching him return to his screens. He had been at it for 18 hours a day since the fever broke. He was hunting for the money trail, hunting for the leak, hunting for the person who had sold him out to the Albanians. "You're stuck," she observed. Silvio stiffened. He slammed the laptop lid down a fraction of an inch, a gesture of frustration he rarely allowed himself. "I am not stuck. I am thorough. You've been staring at the same shipping manifest for 4 hours, Lauren pointed out. "I've watched you scroll up and down the same column of numbers since dinner." He sighed, running a hand through his short black hair. "Something is wrong. The money was moved, but the books are balanced. It doesn't make sense. If they paid for the hit using family funds, there would be a deficit, a hole. But there is nothing. The accounts are perfect." "Maybe they didn't use family funds," Lauren suggested. "The Albanians don't work on credit, and they don't work cheap," Silvio growled. "The contract for a hit on a Don. That's 7 figures minimum, half up front. That kind of cash doesn't just appear out of thin air. It came from inside. It had to." He rubbed his eyes, the exhaustion finally showing. "I'm missing it. It's right in front of me, and I'm missing it." Lauren looked at the screen. It was a dense spreadsheet of imports, olive oil, textiles, marble, coming in from Italy and Greece. It was a language of commerce she didn't speak, but she understood systems. Biology was a system. A healthy body was a balanced ledger. Illness was a deficit or a chaotic surplus. "Move over," she said. Silvio looked at her, his eyebrow arching. "Excuse me?" "Move over," she repeated, nudging his shoulder. "Let me look. Lauren, this isn't a medical chart. These are laundering fronts for international shipping logistics. It's complicated. I decipher blood work panels for animals that can't tell me where it hurts," she said calmly. "And I ran a business for 5 years. Math is math, Silvio. Sometimes you need fresh eyes. You're looking for what you expect to see. I don't know enough to have expectations. He hesitated, then slowly slid the stool over, giving her space. It was a massive concession of territory. He was letting her into the inner sanctum of his operation. Lauren stood next to him, leaning over the keyboard. She could smell him. Soap, musk, and the faint medicinal scent of the ointment. She focused on the screen. "Okay," she said, squinting at the rows. "Explain the baseline." "What is normal?" "Column A is the declared value of the shipment," Silvio explained, pointing a long finger at the screen. "Column B is the insurance valuation. Column C is the actual tax paid upon entry." Lauren scanned the numbers. They matched. It was boringly perfect. "And these dates?" she asked, pointing to the timestamps. "Arrival dates at the port of Newark." Lauren scrolled down. Hundreds of entries. Thousands of tons of cargo. It was dizzying. But as she scrolled, her brain started to pick up a rhythm. It was like listening to a heartbeat. Lub-dub, lub-dub, lub-dub. And then a skip. "Stop," she said. "What?" "Scroll back up. 2 months ago. The shipment of ceramic tiles." Silvio scrolled up. "What about it?" "Look at the weight," she said. "It's listed as 4,000 pounds. The tax is calculated for 4,000 pounds. But look at the fuel surcharge on the trucking invoice in column F." Silvio squinted. "It's standard." "No, it's not," Lauren corrected. "I have a truck. I haul trailers. I know fuel consumption. The surcharge here is for a load that weighs significantly less. If they were hauling 4,000 pounds of tile, the fuel cost would be 20% higher for that distance." Silvio went still. He leaned in closer, his shoulder brushing hers. "Are you saying the container was light?" "I'm saying the container was empty," Lauren said, "or filled with styrofoam. They declared the value, they paid the tax to make it look legitimate, but they didn't ship the product, which means they pocketed the overhead." Silvio finished, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "The cost of the goods. If you don't buy the marble, but you bill the company for it, you keep the purchase price," Lauren said. "How much is a container of marble?" $50,000, Silvio said. He began typing furiously now, his fingers flying across the keys. "If they did this once a week for a year..." "Ghost shipments," Lauren murmured. "It looks like business as usual on the tax forms, but the money for the product goes into a black hole." Silvio pulled up a new window, cross-referencing the shipping manifests with the trucking logs. He filtered by the specific fuel discrepancy Lauren had noticed. The screen filled with red highlights. "God," Silvio breathed. "It's everywhere. Small amounts. A few thousand here, a few thousand there. Siphoned off over 3 years. It's millions. They've been bleeding me dry for 3 years." "Who signs off on the trucking invoices?" Lauren asked. "That's the choke point. Someone has to approve the lower fuel bill while the main ledger shows the full weight." Silvio didn't answer immediately. He stared at the screen, his face hardening into a mask of stone. He clicked on the digital signature at the bottom of the invoice. A name appeared. G. Moretti. "Who is G. Moretti?" Lauren asked. "Nobody," Silvio said. "A low-level dock foreman. He doesn't have the brains to set up a shell corporation for the kickbacks." "Then look at who pays G. Moretti," Lauren suggested. Silvio traced the payroll ID. It routed through a subsidiary company called Janus Holdings. He hacked into the corporate registry for Janus Holdings. It was a dummy corporation, registered in the Caymans. But the recovery email for the admin account... Silvio stopped breathing. Lauren looked at the screen. The recovery email was an old, personal address. mk1985protonmail.com. The silence in the penthouse was absolute. It was heavy, suffocating. Lauren saw Silvio's hand tremble once, then clench into a fist so tight his knuckles cracked. "Marco," he whispered. The name sounded like a curse. "Your consigliere," Lauren said softly. She remembered the name from his stories during their late-night dinners. The man he called brother. The man who had stood beside him at his father's funeral. Silvio stood up abruptly. The chair skidded back across the hardwood floor with a harsh screech. He walked to the window, placing his hands against the glass, leaning his forehead against the cool surface. He sat at my table, Silvio said, his voice hollow. He poured wine for my mother. He carried my sister's casket. Lauren didn't move. She knew better than to offer platitudes. This wasn't a boo-boo she could kiss better. This was a knife in the back, twisted by the one person supposed to guard it. He's stealing from the family to pay for the bullets to kill me, Silvio said, turning around. His eyes were dry, but they were burning with a cold, terrifying fire. He didn't just want me dead, Lauren. He wanted the throne. He's been building a war chest for years. He thinks you're dead, Lauren reminded him. He thinks he's won. He has, Silvio said. He's dissolving the loyalist factions right now. I saw the memos. He's restructuring. He's clearing house. He looked at Lauren. I have to kill him. It wasn't a question. It wasn't a debate. It was a statement of physics. Gravity makes things fall. Betrayal makes men die. I know, Lauren said. She didn't flinch. 3 weeks ago, the thought of murder would have sickened her. Now, after living in the shadow of this man, after seeing the scars on his body and the burden he carried,